The world is changing, but is it changing enough? We'll talk about that on today's episode of the Geek Watch podcast.
This is the Geek Watch podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 108 of the Geek Watch podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me on the phone again is Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hey, Brian.
Well, back out to the parking lot again.
I am. Yep.
Yep.
Strange stuff going on with cable and internet, and yep, I am down. I'm in the same ball field parking lot.
Yep. Well, of course, this has been a weird week for sure, and it's in some aspects it's going to be kind of weird to talk about geek stuff with, it seems like there's more important things going on. We are going to talk about that for a little bit, but at the same time, I mean, obviously, what's been going on this week, definitely something that we should talk about. But, I mean, there's a lot of bad news everywhere. I just saw an article that AMC is pretty much sure that they're not going to be able to come to get back to reopen, is what they're saying. And
the movie theaters are not going to survive.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking really bad for them. They said that, of course, here in West Virginia, there's talks about reopening things starting on the 15th. But that's just the start of everything, and that's here. So basically what AMC is saying is that if they're not able to really get started by the end of June, that's going to be it. But you have to look at, even if they do decide to open, what are they going to have to play? Because a lot of theaters are holding off way past June. I mean, they're, the big ticket movies that that some place like AMC would depend on, they're not going to be available for a while. I mean,
they're big summer blockbusters.
Yeah,
that's.
Yeah, I mean, everything's really being pushed to the end of the year because, of course, they want to make absolutely sure that that people are going to be not only able to go to theaters, but they're going to be willing to. And I mean, there's even no real guarantee till the end of the year. But I mean, they're wanting to push this to the end. But in the meantime, like I said, AMC, one of the biggest theater chains in America, they are in a situation where they may not be able to wait that long, and so that's going to be a major, that's going to be a major change to the theater game in general, and especially for Hollywood. And, but, of course, they're trying to push on, with business as usual, even though things are so different. And, I figured that eventually content would start to run out. And so, there'd be this desperate grab for content. And so I have to bring this up because I've seen this I've seen several articles on this, and I don't know if you heard about this yet or not, but it's looking like, of course, we talked about HBO Max. Apparently, they're going to be getting the Snyder Cut of the Justice League.
I have heard things like that about about the Snyder Cut, and the world's rejoicing and the like.
Yeah, well, there have been some naysayers out there who said there was never going to be a Snyder Cut, and I'm sure they feel real stupid right now, and by them I mean me. So, but then again, I mean, when I said there was no way the Snyder Cut was coming out, I mean, again, I realized that I didn't say when at the time that it's like, well, if there was a pandemic or something, it'll probably come out, So I can't lean on that exactly.
Yeah, our world has really, it's being reduced to memes is such a big thing now. So all the, I didn't have murder hornets on my bingo. I didn't have K-pop flooding on my apocalypse bingo kind of thing. So we are seeing things that that our speculative fiction authors did not see coming. The big thing is that everyone's saying, keep going back to Stephen King, and even Stephen King says this is much scarier than anything I've ever written. That we're living in the Stand and we're living in the Dead Zone. So, but at the same time, and he says, no, this is much scarier. And so when Stephen King says this is much scarier,
well, I mean, there's a point where you're like, where you don't want things to get, you don't want to write about things that can get this bad, and at the same time, you also don't want to stretch a credible thing. It's like, well, I mean, there's no way all this could happen, and it has. But so yeah, they apparently there will be a Snyder Cut that will be showing on HBO Max, and so. But that's the thing. It's like now all these rumors of director's cuts of films are now in the works, et cetera, et cetera. I've heard rumors of a 3.5 hour Ghostbusters 2016 cut, that they want to do a director's cut of that and put it out. Unlike the Snyder Cut, I believe that a 3.5 to 4 hour Ghostbusters cut is possible. I just don't think it's that it's advisable.
Yeah, as long as we get more Kevin in the office. Yeah, I could watch 3 hours of Kevin in the office cleaning his glasses and not answering the fish tank phone. I'd be fine with that.
Well, the one scene that I know that got cut out of the movie, and it's a scene that, of course, makes by it being cut means that there are some things that happen afterwards that you're like, what the heck is going on here? This doesn't make sense. But Kevin, the possessed Kevin, of course, makes the Army and the National Guard dance in the street. And that scene was completely cut out of the movie, and so when they're kind of striking this pose and the Ghostbusters walk up, it's like, what the heck's going on here? Well, you missed the dance number because they cut it from the movie. So, but the thing about of course, the biggest problem, and we've talked about this before, the biggest problem I had with Ghostbusters was there was a lot of improv going on, and you have to be able to kind of cut and trim that. And which they, didn't happen, and adding more to it, I think kind of exacerbates the problems, at least that I had with the movie,
Yeah, and sometimes with improv, it's lightning in a bottle. It can be really funny one time, but if you try to recreate it, you're not going to get that same, that exact same thing. So if something was really funny on set and they're like, do it again so we can get another take, you may not catch that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you would know that better than anyone, for sure. But the thing about it is, it's like when you're riffing and coming up with jokes, I mean, some of them land and some of them don't, for sure. And one thing I definitely noticed is, that, of course, you have these, Kristen Wiig had, a very specific character in the movie. But it always seemed like when she was riffing and she was doing improv, she kind of dropped that character and became more herself, and which became really noticeable, I think. And so, and not to say that, Kristen Wiig doesn't know how to do comedy. Good Lord. That would be the most ridiculous thing to say ever.
And that could be the thing about it, is she knows how to do comedy. She wasn't necessarily playing a character that was comedic herself, but was in comedic situations and reacted to them comically. So that character, putting forth it was the straight man. Her character was the straight man, and everyone else was Banana Man, and so to kind of switch over like that, people just it's a formula.
Oh yeah,
It's a
for
formula.
sure.
You got to follow the formula.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, but like I said, there's been all these rumors that we're going to get the director's cut of Ghostbusters, and I've even heard rumors, and I'm going to have to I can't believe I'm bringing this up again, but this is but if people are literally thinking about this, I have to say that this is this just shows just how desperate people are for content, and how desperate movie theaters are for content. But there's been the rumor, and take this with a grain of salt, that that we may see on our screens finally the rumored butthole cut of Cats. Oh my God!
Someone found it.
I could. Well, I mean, it's on a hard drive somewhere, I guess. But that's the thing. It's like
So
everybody's
now-
like, I want to see the butthole cut, and
Yeah, you're one of them. So yeah,
I'm not.
you're
Well,
gonna
I
get
mean,
your wish.
I'm not sure I am, to be honest. But yeah, because that's the thing. It's like, yeah, there's a curiosity, pardon the pun, a curiosity about what this thing looked like before they had to fix the special effects on it. But yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, I mean, I could see myself going to a theater and watching this train wreck, but sitting at home by myself, I don't know. I don't know. It's like, I just don't know. It's just like, I'm afraid that I would watch it. That's the thing. It's like, would I go down that rabbit hole or cat hole or whatever hole that is? Would I, it's like, I don't know. I don't know how I would feel about that for sure. But, I mean, at this point, like I said, I mean, there's, theaters are, movie studios are looking to revamp what their schedules and everything else, and coming up with new content. And Ari Aster, the writer-director who brought us Midsommar and Hereditary, is saying he's wanting to come out with a nightmare comedy that clocks in at 4 hours long. Did you hear about this?
Huh. I have not. I think he could do it.
Oh,
yeah.
No,
I
do
just
have
don't
to.
know that I want something that long.
Yeah, I mean, 4 hours is kind of crazy. You kind of have to break that up. I'm like, I mean, I think he could pull it off. I mean, he's certainly the master of the slow burn. I do have to ask you: Have you seen Hereditary or Midsommar? Have you seen any of those?
Yes, I've seen both of them.
You have. I gotta ask you. So, what did you think?
Oh, I love them both. They're Hereditary. It really, it kind of threw me. Like that's. But I get the appeal of it. I get everything that and I did enjoy it. It was deep. I definitely enjoyed Midsommar better, and I know I honestly thought we had talked about this, but I guess maybe I was talking to Kevin or something. But that Midsommar was the remake of Wicker Man that we should have gotten. So like a big thing is in the original Wicker Man, his the main character, the inspector, his piety, his religion, his faith was such a big part of what made that film what it was. Well, when you try to translate that into a more modern setting, and then we end up with this Nicolas Cage who instead of being appalled by like sexuality and things like that, he's just he doesn't read as well. But when we're looking at Midsommar and we're looking at it as actual that the modern life is kind of the enemy here, and it ends up being that she really needs to leave modern behind, because even though she's out in the modern world, she is miles away from her parents. She's nowhere near. She could only talk to her family, through a screen or on a phone. And then there's a great tragedy that happens. Like, technology was supposed to bring us together. It's actually brought us further apart. But then she is taken to this village where, without technology, they're the closest family she's ever had, and that they're willing to feel her pain with her. I mean, it's a big theme throughout, all of Midsommar is shared pain, because we love each other, that we're willing to share your pain. And even though with modern society we can see everyone's pain, but it makes us uncomfortable, so we don't want to talk about it. And that was a big thing with her boyfriend's friends. As soon as she comes around and they're like, oh, she's dealing with something, we got to leave, kind of thing. But then there's this boy from this village where they're so close, and he wants to actually talk to her about it. And so she ends up finding this new family. So I really did enjoy it, and it's that folk horror, just like like we get in The Wicker Man. And it was, and there are some nods to The Wicker Man and to the 2000 whatever Nicolas Cage Wicker Man. One in particular, I don't know if we're going to do spoilers or not.
Well, at this point, I think it would be safe to go ahead and do spoilers. So, spoiler warning if you haven't seen it.
Spoiler warning: when they put the kid in the bear suit.
Yeah, well, they put him in a bear.
They put him in a bear, yeah, and Nicolas Cage wore a bear suit in his Wicker Man, and then they burn him up. So I think that was kind of like, yeah, we're destroying the bad Wicker Man.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I really did, and I really did enjoy it, and I could see both, Hereditary and Midsommar, and they've got that really good balance with each other.
Oh yeah. Well, one thing I'll just say something briefly about both. Well, of course, we didn't talk about it too much because I didn't want any spoilers. But I always say about Hereditary, the one thing about Hereditary that's different than other horror movies is in regular horror movies, you have an ebb and flow. You build tension, you release tension. It's sort of like a roller coaster. Hereditary is not scripted that way. They build tension, and then they hold on that tension until you get used to that being the new normal, and then they ramp it up. It's a very unpleasant, right? It's like it's unrelenting, and it's like I've always said. There's that midpoint in the movie, whether you're, it's the crossing point. If you can get past that midpoint, with of course is the telephone pole scene. If you can get past that, then you'll deal with the rest. But I know a lot of people who can't.
Yep. And I can see, because at times you just think this is a weird child, and like you kind of think, oh well, maybe she's gonna get possessed, and then like realizing oh she was possessed the whole time, and now they've kind of spoiled the plans. So.
Oh yeah. Well, and the thing about it too is it is such an unrelenting film. It's like it doesn't let off. It will stop long enough for you to just basically get used to how hot the water is, and then it cranks it up a little bit. Midsommar, it's a very on the other hand, Midsommar is not it's not the death march to hell that Hereditary was, but I will say, it's really interesting because ultimately what it is a breakup film, and it basically lets you know what the theme is right at the beginning when, of course, our main character, she loses her entire family because of a murder-suicide, loses her sister and her father and her mother, and she's just devastated as you would expect her to be. And here she is in the arms of her boyfriend, just breaking down crying, which is completely understandable. And you see how uncomfortable he is,
Yep.
and it's like if you're paying attention, you're sitting here going, these two don't need to be together. you know.
Because he's not feeling her pain. Yeah.
He's not he's not there for her. And to be honest, that for me, that was uncomfortable to watch. I know some people might feel sorry for the guy. It's like, oh, she's losing her marbles, and it's uncomfortable. But, for me, I felt uncomfortable. Like, she needs somebody to be there with her, and it's completely understandable why she feels the way. And he can't comfort her. He just cannot sympathize with her at all. And she's alone in that moment, even if she doesn't realize it. She's alone. And it felt so uncomfortable, and I felt so bad for her, And, of course, then you go to that scene where, she, toward the end of the movie where she's screaming, and all these women around her are also screaming and sobbing.
We're with you. We're here. Your pain is our pain. Yes.
Yeah. And, at the beginning, you're like, are they mocking her? And you realize, no, they're not mocking her. They're like, and it's a callback right to that scene at the beginning, and it reminds you of that. And you're like, holy, it's like, there she was alone. Here she's not, And so it makes absolute sense why she buys into this community and becomes a part of the community. And a very, like I said, a very, very good film. And of course, there was some things that were cut out of that film. And my understanding is with the digital release, we will get a director's cut that gives us more of it, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that for sure.
Okay.
But I figured before we go, I mean, obviously we do need to talk a little bit about what's been going on this week, especially with I'm sure everybody who's listening is very well aware of George Floyd and what has happened because of that, and it's. In a strange way, it's kind of pushed, all this stuff about the coronavirus to the side because, of course, everyone else has been, everybody of course, is thinking about this now. And, especially with as all the things that we've been dealing with the last few months, this, I think it seems like it hits harder. Everybody is just at the, they're at the end, this is their last nerve, and then something like this happens, which it's been happening. I mean, the last month or so, we have been seeing a lot of this in the news, and this was just, and we've been seeing it for years, for sure.
Yeah, I think on your TikTok, it's been on the news constantly, and it's on news feeds constantly. But I think on your TikTok, you were the first person who even talked about Rodney King, and and I haven't even seen parallels to that yet, and and not only that, but the first time they called it the lynching, the man who was hunted down and shot, by a father and son, I think of lynching and I think of hanging from a tree, but they're absolutely right that was lynching.
That and a 27-year-old woman who was minding her own business, sleeping in her own house, and the police bust in, wind up shooting and killing her. Because
Breonna Taylor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And for no reason in the world, is that they had the wrong address on a warrant. And so, but the thing about it is, I think that this has become a perfect storm of things where people, I'm hoping at this point, are now saying this is enough. This has gone far enough, and it seems like that may be the case. Although I know, and why I brought up Rodney King is that a lot of things were being said that once we once some time passed, we things went back to normal, and we were able to kind of ignore that. But as a horror writer, I know the importance of tension and release, and I think especially in this situation where, especially with coronavirus and everything that has, all the change that's brought on, this was just it. No, they were like, this is enough. We've had enough of this. and perhaps now we could possibly see people kind of take this seriously. And when I posted TikTok, I expected to get some negative comments, and I did. And of course, everybody talks about rioting and looting, and that's not the way to get any kind of attention. That being said, when you mean a quiet protest, like say kneeling during the national anthem in a football game, that's more appropriate.
Yep.
Well, it's like that's the thing. People are not going to be comfortable with it until it's quiet enough they can ignore it. And
and I've seen those, and as we have become a battle of memes because I've seen there's the Kaepernick kneeling beside of the officer Chauvin kneeling, and and then we had the protesters who are protesting wanting to go back to work, and versus the protesters who are protesting violence against Black Americans, and we're fighting over these pictures, and no one's most of the people aren't doing anything. They're just well, why is this okay, but this isn't okay, and well, you wanted this, but you're also looting, and that's not what's important. I don't know what it's not straw man. I don't know what and maybe mudslinging. I don't know any of those terms. But,
the term you're looking for is an AdHominem attack, and basically an AdHominem attack is where you're attacking someone's character instead of talking their points. In other words, where somebody is arguing a point, and you say, "But you did this or you did this," and so by attacking their character, you're basically saying that you can't trust what they're saying because for whatever reason they're not a good person, or or whatever. And so you're definitely getting a lot of this stuff. One of the comments that I got on my TikTok, saying that this has gone on long enough and we have to have a change is somebody asked me, well, how can you talk about that when you don't talk about black on black crime and things like that? And like, what's that what's that what does that have to do with what's going on? Again, it's like they're saying, well, look how how much more criminal the criminality of black folks, and that sort of thing. And I'm like, well, you also have to understand they're over police and they're being harassed, and the fact is, if I shoot a black man, it's more likely that it's going to be ruled justifiable. If somebody a black man shoots me, they're going to jail. Me, I got a shot.
Yep. Me, I get pulled over for speeding. There's, point 0.000 whatever is that a cop is going to pull their gun on me, and and I recognize that.
I was in a this happened years and years ago, but I was in the car with someone. I don't smoke pot, but I was riding in a car with a friend of mine who does smoke pot and had it on him, and we got pulled over by a police officer in Virginia. And if, but we, and they found the pot, but we got to drive away. We weren't charged with anything. If we had been black, we'd be in jail now, I know some people hate it when you bring up, white privilege, but it's a thing. It really is a thing. And the thing about it is, when I think of white privilege, I don't think of it as a gift that's been given to me as much as I think of it as a right that's been taken away from other people. Because everyone should be treated fairly. And but to bring this back, we are the Geek Watch podcast. To bring this back to the geek world, while we're of the mind of, treating people fairly, there's a lot of BS, even in the geek world, that absolutely, I think needs to go. People who are marginalized because, they are a different color, a different gender, heck, just even the matter of, what version of Doctor Who do they like better? And it's, we can be very, and there's a lot of that everywhere. I mean, goth culture, which I love goth culture, but at the same time, I know that there are some goths out there that love black unless it's somebody's skin, and that has to go.
Yeah.
But there's a, and I've said this many times. I mean, with the coronavirus and everything else that's going on, a lot of things are being stress tested at this point. And there's just a lot of stuff that we've been able to ignore in the past that we just can't ignore it anymore. And like I said in the TikTok, I'm hoping that this time things are going to be different, because they need to be different. And because this has gone on way too long. It's simple. It's simply an obvious how things have been, how comfortable we've been ignoring it and hoping that it'll go away. Now it's now it's in the forefront, and it can't be ignored anymore. I think very much like the Me Too movement, that has brought out a lot of things to the forefront, to a point where, there's certain behaviors that, or secret behaviors that are not tolerated anymore. I hope that this point in time will do the same thing, finally. I mean, obviously, when you're looking at hundreds of years of an institutionalized racism, it's not going to go away overnight, but it's certainly not going to go away at all if we continue to ignore it. And with it now being at the forefront, finally, and in everyone's face, maybe we can start to see this change that we've been hoping for a while. So, it's like I said at the beginning, the world's changing, but, is it changing enough? I figure at this point, only time can tell. But, obviously, Mandy, I'm sure you feel the same. Of course, we here on the podcast certainly support Black Lives Matter, and we're not afraid to say Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
So, to our geeks of color out there, know that we're with you for sure. And like I say, hopefully things get better, because they need to, for sure. And so with that, we come to the end of episode 108 of the Geek Watch podcast. Thank you for listening. And, again, we're not sure when we will broadcast again. Obviously, with things being as weird as they are, we've been not as steady. But, as much as we can, we'll definitely bring out the podcast to you. And we want you all to remember that we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform, and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.